headed south on Highway 22, just out of Killdeer and headed toward Dickinson, North Dakota. Excuse me. Now, last week I did miss doing my driving video. Excuse me. And that was not theater there. I was actually dealing with being sick and laryngitis and such, so I sounded awful. I actually did try and record this video, but it was bad, so I didn't end up keeping it. I just said, nope, we'll throw that audio away and try again later. So, week later, it's later. I haven't even done my pens and use video this week. I've been busy. I chaperoned an elementary school dance this week, and usually that's the night I record it. Well, I would have recorded it earlier, but I had things going every single night this week. So, yeah, something had to give, so pens and use had to give. Maybe I'll do it Sunday. We'll see if I have time. But anyway, I just left Killdeer, North Dakota, and I was going to look up some statistics for you, but then I didn't. But I'll tell you what, I've been thinking about growth a little with this video, and I want to give you some statistics on a city I haven't visited yet in one of these driving videos. It's Watford City, North Dakota, and yes, I'm looking at my statistics. This will give you an idea of the scale of the oil boom, and I'll reference some of these other cities we're going to run through. Watford City in 2002, which is the first time I ever visited Watford City, had 1,382 people. Nice small town. 2010, kind of an oil boom was barely getting started. Now I've got hiccups along with the cough. 1,764 people. 2013, 3,284 people. Then the estimate for 2015, see 2016 is not over yet, the estimate for 2015 was 6,708 people. Do you see a problem there? This is pretty serious growth for a small town. Totally changed the character of the town. And, I just can't even imagine living there. And when I finally take you on a driving video up to Watford City, so I guess I need to make a trip one of these days, I'll talk about it. I'll show you some pictures and so on, because I took some pictures during the height of the oil boom and give you an idea what the heck is up with this place. That's what the oil boom did to North Dakota. It brought not just a few new people, a lot of new people. My town, by contrast, changed by about 50 people in that same time period. We hover right around 1,600 people, so we used to be bigger than Watford City. Not anymore. So a little bit of growth is good, some stability is good, a small shrinkage is okay. That kind of growth just totally changes the town. Excuse me. Now, we're going to head toward Dickinson, North Dakota. I'll talk more about the facts and figures for Dickinson when we get closer, but that's another one. And, the oil boom has temporarily stopped, but we'll be seeing more changes there, too, although nothing like what was projected. And we're very close to the city of Manning, which is actually, I shouldn't even use the word city because it's unincorporated. It's the county seat of Dunn County. With 74 people, I couldn't get any statistics on it, but I'll tell you what did happen in Manning is they had a lot of temporary housing suddenly appear. Again, big change to a little community. So, since it's unincorporated, there just isn't good information on it. So, sorry. But anyway, we're not in Manning yet. We're just headed south on 22. So, when they talk about change, what do they mean? Well, do they mean oil brings a lot of crime? Well, yeah, you do get more crime because you have more people. Although, let's be honest, the crime rate, which means the amount of crime based on the population, crime per unit population, did not really change. In fact, it even slightly lowered. But you did start to see more of certain crimes that were not seen before, like human trafficking was one. Um, More drugs, more property crimes, that kind of thing. And some of the pollution and environmental damage. I mean, I know our state is deep in the pockets of oil, but we definitely had some environmental issues. Still have them. That whole pipeline debacle is definitely an example of it. And by the way, don't let anybody fool you that that whole debacle is about water. It's not. There's a lot more going on there than just concern about the water in the Little Missouri River getting polluted. And I'd also point out that objections were raised to this 2 years ago, even though the oil company claims that no, the tribe never objected to anything. We gave them a chance. They just suddenly had this protest. Huh. Well, no, 2014. So, and I will also say, and I hate to say do false equivalence or anything, but there is some blame to go around. My natural sympathies are toward the protesters, but I'm realistic enough to see that it's not all there. There's a lot of out-of-state agitators coming in, causing trouble. And again, the whole story is much more than just oil. So that deserves a video of its own. Let me get back to the main topic here, which is about the changes brought by this oil boom. So you might notice we're on a nice 2-lane highway. Well, it's always been a nice 2-lane highway. It just didn't used to be this nice. It didn't used to have the passing lanes, the turning lanes. And as we get further south, it'll turn into a 4-lane. That was never there. It was just a country road. Well, from what I understand, it got so bad for a while that it was like being in a traffic jam, traveling on this road at the wrong times of the day. Clearly not when I'm traveling, but that's what I was told. Didn't experience it firsthand because you might have figured out that I don't drive a lot, and when I do, it's usually not at those high traffic times anyway. So, yeah, I can't address it with firsthand experience. But there is a reason they did all this work on this road. And it's a good example of why I do these. By the way, we're coming into Manning. It's very small. There always was a gas station here, but it was never anything this elaborate. Courthouse is here, although you won't see much of it. You'll just see a tiny court. Yep, there it is on the left. There always was it's not much. There always was a used car dealership here, but again, nothing to this scale. There's a bar to your right, which I don't think the dash cam picked up, if I remember the footage right. There's the used car dealership. Yeah, there's the sign for the bar. That didn't seem to change much, and there's a little church over here somewhere that doesn't look very churchy. Now, I think that's the same used car lot, but it's bigger. Yeah, here's the church. And we're out of Manning. This business here on the right is new. And we're going to see a lot more of it as we head south, which I'll talk about that when we get there. But anyway, so the character of the roads has changed just because there's so much more traffic. Character of the towns change. You get used to seeing all these people and then suddenly all these new faces come in. Well, I've said that's a good thing. It can also be an uncomfortable thing. It can also be a bad thing. You get a bunch of students coming in who don't have a stable home through no fault of their own, and that's going to play havoc with your education system. Watford City Schools had to deal with a large homeless population. Now, homeless, of course, based on how the government defines homeless, these people would live in trailers, but then they're moving constantly because it's for whatever reason. And just imagine you're a kid living with your whole family in a trailer. And I don't mean trailer like the ones out at your trailer park. I mean like the ones you see on the highway in the summer where they go camping in them. I mean your family living in that. Not just for the weekend, not for a fun week at the park. I mean, that's home. In the winter, in North Dakota. I have pictures taken in Killdeer and Watford City, of trailers with hay bales stacked around just to provide some insulation to the pipes and the plumbing so it doesn't freeze, because those things aren't really built for winter. I mean, I don't own a trailer, obviously, but what people who do own them have to do is winterize them, or else the water in the pipes freezes and then they burst, and then that's that. Well, if you're living it in the winter, you can't do that. And again, you're a kid living in that, you're a parent living in that. There's no privacy. There's no room. And of course, those things are made flimsy and cheap. What an awful, awful situation. And then you're expected to go to school and learn if you're a kid. So that's something that the teachers of Watford City really had to deal with. And kudos to them, because a lot of these teachers who weren't already established in the community are coming in as the school desperately hires new teachers. And, we don't pay well enough for you to afford housing here for like a $2,000 a month rent. What do we do now? Well, you get multiple teachers sharing an apartment that's meant for like one or two people. You get teachers with ridiculous commutes from somewhere with more reasonable rent, although in fairness, Watford City, there wasn't much around. Watford City actually ended up building teacher housing and bumping up their salary quite a bit. I am not 100% sure what the base is now in Watford City, but it's quite a lot more than where I live. Because it had to be. And then what do you do when the oil boom's gone? And you don't have this influx of cash, and you built this school, you built this teacherages, you've raised salaries, and hired lots of teachers. It's an ugly situation. Some of it, you might build temporary classrooms just for a few years just to see how the thing plays out. Okay, so you take them away. What about the teachers you hired? Well, lay them off. Yeah, they're people. It shouldn't be that easy just to lay somebody off because you don't need them anymore. And I know people say, well, that's what's done in business all the time. Well, yeah, that doesn't make it right. So it's brought a lot of changes. Now, we're headed south here. You might notice, there is a power line there, but it's basically pretty open country. And this part of 22 is mostly as I remember it. It has been repaved, but it hasn't changed much. You see some oil wells out there that weren't there before, but, overall it hasn't changed much. But as we'll get closer to Dickinson, that changes. You'll see a lot of businesses that weren't there. You'll see man camps. And that brings up a good point, too. I know some will accuse me of being sexist here, but the types of jobs that oil fields attract are typically more male. And so you have a surplus male population. And that brings its own problems, because who are they supposed to date? Who are they supposed to, whatever with? So women become more almost like a commodity. And, if you look at on YouTube some of these videos about the hell of living in the Bakken, a lot of those videos are made by women that are experiencing blatant sexism and sexual harassment and worse as a result of this lack of women around. And that's definitely a big problem. And it's always been a little bit of a problem because, let's be honest, North Dakota isn't exactly a place that appeals to a lot of women. There are women that love the place. I work with a lot of them. But a lot of them are women who were born here and raised here. It's just not, in fairness, a lot of these men wouldn't be in North Dakota either if they weren't looking for jobs. It's not a state that attracts people for the most part, unless you're weird like me. Because I came from Pennsylvania. But anyway, these were very male-centric jobs, and you end up with male-centric crime. When I was talking about the sex trafficking, this was girls, and I do mean the word girls in this case, young girls. and it was thanks to the oil boom. Williston had to deal with what are they called? Stripper bars on its main street, which was an ugly situation, I guess. One of the, and I'm actually really curious how this turned out. And now that I've brought it up, I'm going to have to research this after I stop recording this. But there was one stripper bar in Williston that got upset that they couldn't be a stripper bar anymore. So they said, "Well, we'll show you, you bunch of right wingers, because yeah, it's Williston. Yes, they are right wing." And they said, "We're going to open a gay bar," which they did, to their credit. I'm just curious all of a sudden now, as I say that, how it turned out. Because I read one follow-up about a year ago, I want to say, and, it wasn't, the author of the article was saying, well, basically you go in, and other than there's a couple rainbows around, you really wouldn't know the difference, because there's a lot of straight people in there. But I am curious how it's turned out in the end. It's, I mean, not only is this a very right-wing area, it's a very sparse population, and even with the oil boom, and there just aren't a lot of gay people around to keep a business like that open. So, yeah, it's an interesting experiment, and yeah, so look it up if you're interested. I'm definitely interested. I'll try and remember, because I've been doing more of this lately. I'll try and remember to put a link. I'll write down the time here, 16:47. Well, whatever time it is, 16 something, but yeah. Yeah, that was awkward. I'll try and look it up and put a reference down there. I've been putting little footnotes down. I'm not sure what corner they're in, because this is all backwards, so I won't point. I'll just say I try and put them down in the, what would be your right-hand corner of the screen. I've been putting numbers. So, yeah, I'll make a footnote of that. I'll also footnote Watford City, Dickinson. I'm not going to bother footnoting Manning. I mean, 74 people, it's not much data out there. But anyway, that was an interesting thing about Williston. Williston was also having trouble. They were dealing with people living in Walmart parking lots. So people were scared to go to Walmart. Now, when I say living, I mean they would park their camper and in the parking lot and live there. So the city and Walmart actually had to do something about that, because it was getting hard for regular customers to come there and getting uncomfortable. And of course, all these campers means sewage. Well, what do you do with that? There were a lot of cases of illegal sewage dumping all over. And that's a disaster of its own kind. Not one I would have thought of either, I'll just be honest, but it was real. It's, roads are way straight. That's why you have these turning lanes, these passing lanes here, and it's going to turn into a 4-lane. Your sewage and water infrastructure just aren't up to it. And this is an arid part of the state, and of course everybody wants their water for fracking. We also have to give water to people for drinking, and fracking takes a lot of water, by the way. So what do? It is very tough. There's one town, Ray, North Dakota, that's actually, I have to write that down too now that I've referenced it. Doggone it. Anyway, Ray had a sewage problem. They built a nice sewage plant, but then when the oil boom died down, there weren't so many people around. Suddenly the worry is, do we actually have enough sewage to operate the plant? Because it needs a certain capacity in order to operate. Awkward. So they were actually asking for people's sewage. Please, so we can keep our system running. That's an odd thing. But anyway, it's there's a lot involved with a sudden population boom. Now, if you experience slow growth, you kind of grow along with it. You add on to your sewage plant. Eventually, You get to the point, well, we can't Band-Aid it anymore. We got to build a new one. And everybody's like, yeah, I hate to pay the taxes for it, but it's something that's got to be done. And, life goes on. But when it surges like this, you're overwhelmed. Um, I talked about these campers with hay bales around them. These are people setting up in fields, people's yards, um, and getting hosed, basically, with rent. And of course, existing housing, rent skyrocketed to the point that if you're on a fixed income or a lower income, you can't afford to pay the rent anymore. And why is it happening? Because all these high-paid oil field workers are coming in, and all these landlords are like, hey, I can make more money. Now, some proposed rent controls. I do have a problem with that because if I look at it from the other side, if I'm a property owner, I'd like to be able to make some money off of my property. Now, I actually, true story, was a landlord for 1 year. I didn't charge anything ridiculous. I charged, enough so I wasn't losing money on it and making a tiny amount also. It was a house I couldn't sell because I had moved. And so I just thought, well, rather than it sit empty, why don't I just rent it out for a year? And it actually, the guy I rented to took better care of it than I did when I lived there. But anyway, I charged him, what was it, $250 a month. This was a older home. It was not in perfect shape. It was in good shape. And, walking distance to the school. He was a teacher. Walking distance to Main Street. It was a small town, so everything was in walking distance. And that rent was on the low end for the town, but, it was... I paid $10,000 for the house. This was before the oil boom, before the Minot flood, and prices in central North Dakota were very low right then. They're still low. I mean, if you want a part of the state that's not dealing with oil boom garbage, central North Dakota is where it's at. Eastern North Dakota, if you get out of the cities and far enough away from them, is actually also pretty rural, but there's a lot more money in Eastern North Dakota, so you start dealing with other issues. So that's why I kind of like central North Dakota. I'm in western North Dakota, but everywhere you go has its own issues. I always found it depressing when I lived in towns where the population is just shrinking. Businesses are closing. People are going on about how, yeah, I remember back when we had a drugstore. Oh, you remember when there used to be a grocery store in town? And all the buildings are still there. They're just empty. Well, or you're teaching in a school that has a capacity for 300 and some students, but only has 100 and some students. That's depressing. And you look down at the elementary grades, and they're even smaller than what's in the high school, and you just think, what is the future here? So, as much as I don't like this sudden growth, I have lived on the other end of it. That's one of the things that oil does bring, is it does go through boom and bust. We're in a bust now. The state of North Dakota is suddenly saying, oh, we're going to have to cut spending because all that money that was flowing in that we got to be counting on is gone. So legislature this year should be interesting. I think I already told you that they got a ballot initiative so they could raise a fund that was created in order to protect K-12 education from these ups and downs of the economy. And they put it on the ballot with very misleading language that makes you think, oh, schools are going to get more money in this fund because it takes oil money. Well, there's no oil money coming in. It's not going to help. So, yeah, the legislature hates education in this state, I think. Yeah, I just said that. Why not? All right, so you're going to start seeing now a lot of office buildings. These are all warehouses or garages or offices and whatnot, all related to oil. And all these were built in the last few years. I think we're at the part now where it's 4-lane the rest of the way. With the dash cam, it's hard for me to tell where the man camps are, so I'm not going to point them out. But There are man camps and there are man camps. Some man camps are very, just a bunch of trailers, basically. Other man camps are much better built and more organized. Most of the ones along this road were the better built, more organized ones. But I know a guy, sort of, not real well. I know a guy whose job became in the last couple of years, well, last year or so, 2 years maybe, something like that. He worked security for the oil companies. His job became escorting people out after they get told that they've been fired. None of this, yeah, in 2 weeks we're going to have to lay you off so you have time to prepare and start looking for a job. Just, come to the office. All right, so we're going to have to go ahead and let you go. Joe Bob here, because I'm making up a name, will escort you out. Wow. So that's another side of the oil industry. And you've moved your family to North Dakota, chasing an opportunity because the rest of the country was in a recession when the oil boom started here, and all of a sudden you've moved them all up here, and it's gone. And now what? I mean, it's not like there's lots of opportunities in North Dakota. That's why for many decades people have been bailing out on this state. This state just doesn't have a big diversity of opportunities, and for the most part, except for during the height of the oil boom, this has been one of those states that takes money from the federal government, takes more than it pays in taxes, so it's not one of the productive states, and people here don't seem to realize that, but it's true. Anyway, since we're headed toward Dickinson, and I don't want the video to end before I'm ready, I'll just give you a couple facts and figures. 2002, you might notice a common theme here. It's the first time I visited Dickinson, North Dakota. At that time, it was 15,700 people. 15,700 people. 2010, the population had jumped by about 2,000, which is more than my town has, to 17,973 people. It is estimated in 2015 to be at 23,765. Now, the estimations before the oil boom ended were that this was going to be like 60,000 people by 2020. I don't see that happening anymore. I guess it could. This, by the way, I believe is the bypass that didn't used to exist around Dickinson. So you can get from the interstate, go around Dickinson. You don't have to go through it. But I might be wrong. But I'm pretty sure that was the bypass. I haven't actually taken the bypass, so I guess that's a trip I'll have to take one of these days. But you can see how much it's growing. I was part of a committee that went up to Dickinson. We were looking at a couple of things to set up in Dickinson, and it was interesting talking to their economic development people and in the motels and things. I mean, people were living in the motels. They'd live the motel while they worked in the oil field, and then they'd fly home to their family for a few days, because these were really long days that they would work, and they wouldn't take weekends. They would work a bunch of days, like 10 days or 14 days in a row or something, and then have some days off to go home. So motels became their homes, or trailers, or whatever they could find at ridiculous jacked up rents. But anyway, very transient. And if you were interested in getting a home in Dickinson, I mean, it was almost impossible to afford it because the home prices were so high. Hasn't really recovered from that. I guess rents are down, not way down, but down to a more not as high level. But when you have a transient population, they don't have any loyalty. Like, you won't find most people that live in their town are going to like throw trash out or just not care. I mean, you do have those people. For the most part, if you live in an area, you're kind of invested in it and you take care of it. About here is where Dickinson used to stop. As you can tell, we've been driving into Dickinson for quite a while. There on the left is the Walmart. And yeah, I'm going to be stopping soon myself to go grocery shopping. So I better come to an end to this. I'm going grocery shopping here at a grocery store. One of these grocery stores never existed before the oil boom. But next week I'm going to conclude this series. I have some much more interesting scenery to take you through. So next week, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take you home. And I haven't decided yet if I'm going to edit the footage so you just see clips of it, or if I'm just going to speed it up. I haven't decided yet for sure. But I'm going to take you home, and it's not quite an hour and a half home from Dickinson yet. So I really do not want to make an hour and a half epic video. So yeah, that's what I'll do next weekend. And the week after, my plan is to start on my big South Dakota journey from October the 1st. You can see me smiling as I say it, because of course we'll hit Spearfish Canyon. But then I've got a real special treat for you. We'll go through Needles Highway, Iron Mountain Highway, and of course a lot of Black Hills scenery. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to share it with you. So yeah. So pulling into the grocery store. This used to be a Kmart. Kmart has been in trouble a lot lately anyway, and then they just couldn't pay workers and had other issues, so they're gone. And a grocery store has moved in to take its place. So I like the grocery store, and I like the new one that's west of town that didn't used to exist, and that one there has new owners. So yeah. So thank you for watching. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.